All right, back on Brother from Another. This is a story that is not going anywhere, nor should it. Deshaun Watson, first player in NFL history to have a fully guaranteed $200 million plus contract. That's what the Cleveland Browns did. That was part of the price the Browns paid to get Deshaun Watson away from Houston into Cleveland. So there are multiple first-round picks. There are multiple draft picks. There's that $230 million contract. And now there's a waiting game. There's a waiting game from the NFL. What happens now with Deshaun Watson? What will the NFL do? Will there be a suspension? There most certainly will be a suspension, in my opinion. There'll be a suspension. How long will that suspension be? What is to come of the 22 open civil cases accusing Deshaun Watson of either sexual misconduct or sexual assault? What's going to happen with those? Does he settle any of these cases? Does he admit any wrongdoing? Does he fight each of them? What happens there? And then there's the big question that has nothing to do with the legal system at all. It really has to do with your conscience. And we're not just talking about Cleveland. We're talking about football fans nationally, because maybe it's not your team right now, but chances are the way the NFL operates, and let's be honest, the way the NFL operates, chances are your team, your fandom will be challenged with one of these situations. Everybody has had something like this with their team. Like, it's easy. I was talking to a friend of mine from Cleveland over the weekend, and I said to him, look, it's easy when you look at another team and they've got a guy and you can villainize him. Okay, look at it. Oh, we would never do it. We would never do it. Oh, look at that. You sold your soul, all winning at all cost. It doesn't matter. It's just the bottom line. And you don't have a player like that, or if you don't know that you have a player like that, it's easy to sit there and wag your finger and say, oh, we'd never do it. But then when it comes to your area code, when it comes to your zip code, when it comes to your laundry, how do you handle it? And so that's what Cleveland is going through right now. And we'll get into that. But before we get into that, I just want to hear what Nick Caserio had to say. Let's play some sound from Houston general manager Nick Caserio, who had this on his watch as a first-year GM. Last year, first-year GM Caserio walks into the job, has a huge contract, so that's the good news. Highest paid GM in football, and he had never done the job before on his own. That's the good news. The bad news is you come in, and you've got to deal with the Deshaun Watson situation. He dealt with it. He's moving on from it. It's now Cleveland's problem. But here's Nick Caserio talking about Deshaun Watson.
I think the biggest thing probably yesterday provides everybody is clarity, just in terms of direction. I think Deshaun has clarity on his end relative to what his future holds from a football standpoint. I think there's some things, still on a legal front that probably, I don't want to really get into that, but, have to take place. But just clarity for him individually. I think clarity for our organization in terms of what the expectation is moving forward.
So clarity for their organization and what the expectation is moving forward. Now, I don't want to read between the lines on what he's saying there, but is he trying to say that there's a certain kind of player that the Houston Texans will employ going forward? Is that a Deshaun Watson shot? That once they found out about these things, whether Deshaun Watson asked to be traded or not, once they found out about these things, was Deshaun Watson going to be traded? But that's neither here nor there. Really, I want to focus on Cleveland and the divide that exists with Browns football fans. I was really intrigued to hear Charles Robinson say yesterday, his wife grew up in Cleveland, and how there's this conflict with Browns fans, where his wife doesn't know how to feel about this, and how his brother-in-law or brothers-in-law are all on board. Hey, yay Browns, let's go for it. Let's go. Hey, now we got a player. Now we got a chance to win a championship. And I'd like to say that it's the desperation that puts Cleveland in this position, but I'm not sure that's it. Look, we know the Browns are desperate. I joked about it off the top that, how things have changed. They hadn't been to the Super Bowl at the time of the shot in 1989, and they still have never appeared in the Super Bowl. One of the few franchises that has never been to the Super Bowl. I mean, the Carolina Panthers, expansion team, been to the Super Bowl. Jacksonville Jaguars haven't been to the Super Bowl, but teams that just kind of sprung up were able to get to the Super Bowl, and the Browns have been on the doorstep several times and not been able to do it. So I think that desperation speaks to it, and having a lot of quarterbacks over the years, that speaks to it as well. But here's the truth of it is, there were teams that don't have the Browns story, that don't have their narrative, that were also in the conversation, in the mix for Deshaun Watson. So it wasn't just, hell, of course Cleveland would do it. On one hand, if you want to feel good about yourself as a Browns fan who likes this trade, you say, well, other people were doing it too. If it hadn't been us, it would have been someone else. Sure, you can say that, but that's also a confession that you're not original, that you have no distinction, that you're not on a different moral high ground than anyone else. And for some Browns fans, they say, so what? I didn't get into this rooting game to be on the moral high ground. I don't care. Or maybe you do care and you start playing this game innocent until proven guilty, and he hasn't been proven guilty of anything, and that there's not going to be a criminal charge against Deshaun Watson. You can go down that list over and over, but I think for me, and Michael Smith said yesterday that what really angers a lot of people is the money, is the new contract for Deshaun Watson. And I can understand that, but that's not what does it for me. What really bothers me more than anything, and this is, as I said, it's not just a Cleveland story, this is an NFL story. What bothers me is the NFL's unwillingness, I'm not going to say inability, the NFL's unwillingness to handle cases where players are accused of abusing women. Like the NFL refuses, I'll say it that way, the NFL refuses to get that right. There are many places the league as a whole can go to get advice on this. Seek wise counsel. So you can talk to people and say, no, this is how you handle cases that really at their root have the pillars of misogyny and sexism at their root. That's what it is. There are many smart people out there who could advise the commissioner and everyone else, every owner and every ownership group. If you ever wonder, okay, what should we be doing? How do we send a strong message? How do we get this right? How do we discourage it? The league could do it, but the league doesn't. The league hasn't gotten it right. We talked a lot about Ray Rice. In that situation, the league didn't get that right. And there have been many cases since. The league just can't get it right. So I think that's what angers me. That's part one. That when it comes to this, the players usually don't pay a great consequence when it comes to the NFL. That's one. And then two, whenever general managers and ownership groups get even, the light doesn't even have to be green fully. Whenever NFL and ownership groups get even like the light is flickering from caution, from yellow to green, they go this all-out pursuit of superstar talent at the expense of everything else. I've told the story before. Old school now, old school. Look, hey, I'm not going to apologize for being a student of history. So I'll give you an old school example to make the case today. Now, Okay, I wasn't alive for this. Okay, I wasn't alive for this. But this story has always, this anecdote has always jumped out at me because there was some truth there from a president who wasn't always concerned with telling the truth. And that's Richard Nixon. Back in the day, Richard Nixon, he was obsessed with recording things. He had recording devices all over the Oval Office. And Richard Nixon, he had a thing, if you can imagine, he was a Republican, had a thing for the Kennedys from Massachusetts. So he always wanted, he was telling his advisors, man, can't we get somebody in the Boston Globe to write something negative about the Kennedys? I want to make them look bad. And eventually he confided to people close to him. He said, you know what the average person is concerned about? If they got money in their pocket and they can afford to get a beer and a hot dog. His point is, hey, listen, controversy will only last for a little bit, and then people will move on. And I think that's disappointment. Am I disappointed in that? Yes. Do I accept it? No. I don't accept it. I won't accept it in my personal life, but I think that's what we're dealing with. And so I'd love to be pleasantly surprised that this outrage that we hear right now, that we hear it and we see it in Cleveland, I'd love to be pleasantly surprised, and Cleveland is the exception, that until there's some resolution with Deshaun Watson, Cleveland fans, the majority of Cleveland fans, I know this is not the case, but I'd love to see it where the majority of Cleveland fans say, no, we will not rest until we're sure that our quarterback is innocent of all the things that have been thrown at him. He's innocent of all of these charges. I'd love to see that. But I'm not sure that's going to happen. And that's generally how it goes in professional sports. And I think that's the thing that bothers me the most. All right, call me naive. Okay, move on, grow up. This is how it is. Cleveland's not the first. The Browns aren't the first organization to do something like this. They're not the first organization to make these types of decisions. But I think that's what bothers me the most. We'll see what happens with Deshaun Watson, and we'll see how the Browns choose to handle this publicly when they are forced to answer questions outside of a statement. I mean, you can say all sorts of things in the statement, and you can go over it, and you have your PR people look over, and your legal people look over it and make sure that no participles dangle and everything is airtight. But we'll really get to it when they interact with members of the media who I believe will ask the questions that are on the hearts of many Clevelanders. Look, I know it's tough. When your team isn't winning, sometimes you're willing to do anything to win. But is there a point where you say, I'm not willing to do that? And the last thing I'll say before we take a break and talk about the other Cleveland quarterback. He's still a Cleveland quarterback. Technically, he's still a quarterback. They got three of them. The Browns do right now. They got Deshaun Watson. They got Jacoby Brissett. And the other guy that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But before we get there, I just want to say I am encouraged by this. The Cleveland Rape Crisis Center has seen a spike in donations from fans who are angry about what's happening right now with the Browns. They're angry about Deshaun Watson being a member of the Browns. And not only that, I think it's just a combination of being angry about Watson being on their team and what their team was willing to do to get Watson, to acquire him. Because Watson wasn't feeling Cleveland. Now, he better not say, and they better not say, oh, I've always loved this organization. I studied Paul Brown, and I'm a Bernie Kosar fan. I remember the days when, Bill Belichick was there, and they got to the playoffs and they beat the Patriots back then. No. I love the good people of the Midwest. No. Yeah, but Deshaun Watson was not feeling Cleveland until Cleveland said, here, take our franchise. Take the franchise. $230 million, you got it fully guaranteed. That's when he was feeling. That's when he started to feel Cleveland. So I'm encouraged by these fans who have donated. And you know what? Wow. You know what I'm also encouraged by? My friends. That's right. My friends in Western New York. Now, I've had some issues with the Buffalo Bills, but I love the charitable spirit of the fan base. Like Buffalo, if there's a good cause, if you got a good cause, no matter where you are, whether you're in Los Angeles, if you're an opponent in Los Angeles, you're an opponent in Houston, if you're an opponent in Chicago, Buffalo, if they see a good cause for you, those Buffalo fans will get on board. Buffalo has also donated to the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center because it's a good cause. So that is the good news here. We'll be on top of this story. We will continue to follow it. There's no easy answer. There's no quick resolution to it. But I think if I can preach for a little bit, I think it's our job to continue to talk about it, and not just go on as if it's business as usual, because it's certainly not business as usual. Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.